When you look at the stars, what do you think about? Are we alone in the universe? What does this incredibly vast abyss above our heads hide? Where did everything come from? There are many questions about space that might seem childish to some, but would stump any adult. And it seems that modern science has provided answers, if not to all of them, then at least to most. However, both in the solar system and in our cosmic cradle, planet Earth, there are many oddities and anomalies. And in this overview, we will show some of these astonishing facts. And at the end of the episode, you'll get a little bonus. So let's go.
Could it be that the structure of the solar system is the result of intelligent intervention? Or is everything moving so perfectly strictly according to the laws of nature, which just haven't been fully studied by humanity yet? Now you will see the anomalies of our solar system, which even the brightest astronomical minds are powerless to explain. Over the past 4 years, thanks to the Kepler Space Telescope, we've learned that there are a lot of planets in our galaxy. But the most interesting fact that Kepler has revealed for us is that among all these planets, there is nothing like our solar system. This is clearly shown in the animation of the Kepler-4 planetary system. The difference in the orbits of hundreds of exoplanets from the Kepler database compared to our own solar system is immediately striking. Before the start of the Kepler mission in 2009, astronomers assumed that most exoplanetary systems would be arranged like ours. Small rocky planets are closer to the center, huge gas giants are in the middle, and icy chunks of rock are on the outskirts. But it turned out that everything is arranged much more bizarrely. Kepler found hot Jupiters, huge gas giants that are almost touching the stars of their systems. There are more than 700 star systems in total, and none of them are like ours. What do world-renowned astronomers have to say? Let's start with Professor of Astronomy Federico Rassio. The shape of exoplanet orbits is elongated, not circular. Planets turn out to be not where we expect to see them. Many Jupiter-like giant planets, known as hot Jupiters, turn out to be so close to their stars that they orbit them in just a few days. Such a turbulent history leaves very little chance for the formation of a calm solar system like ours. And our models confirm this. Leonid Xanfomality, head of the Planetary Physics Laboratory at the Space Research Institute of the Russian Academy of Sciences and Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, expressed a similar opinion. Computer models are built on the principle that the largest planet is located closest to its sun. But in our case, a small Mercury orbits close to the sun, while the orbits of the giant planets Jupiter and Saturn are far from the star. Of course, there are scientific models that explain such an unusual arrangement. But in practice, when looking through telescopes, astronomers have not yet found similar systems. And will they ever find them? That is the question. And this fact is known to many since school. The distance from the Sun to a planet is determined by a simple pattern and is expressed by this straightforward formula. Where n is the ordinal number of the planet, and r is the distance to the planet in astronomical units. 1 astronomical unit is equal to the distance from the Earth to the Sun. That is, to calculate the distance from the Sun to any planet, you only need to know the distance from the Earth to the Sun. Don't you find it strange that out of all the planets in the solar system, it's the Earth, the only inhabited planet, that plays such an important role in this equation? There's a theory that explains everything. The well-known philosopher and transhumanist Nick Bostrom published a paper in 2003 called "Are We Living in a Computer Simulation?" In it, he suggested that our world is a virtual reality created by some advanced civilization. And as computer technology advances, more and more people with academic degrees are seriously discussing and searching for evidence that our world is a simulation. Everyone has already heard about Elon Musk, who believes everything around us is virtual reality. According to many experts, in about 50 to 100 years, the computing power of computers will increase millions of times. Thanks to this, we will be able to create virtual worlds so realistic that their characters will actually have consciousness, but will have no idea that they are living in a simulation. If humanity is slowly moving toward creating large-scale virtual reality around itself, then what prevents us from assuming that another intelligence in the universe has already done this, and we are part of that computer reality? Modern science believes that 99% of the universe consists of some kind of emptiness, which is also called dark energy or dark matter. They are called dark, not because they lack light, but because modern science has almost no data about them. We only know 1% of the universe. How can we even claim with 100% certainty that it is real? What if all these anomalies in the solar system, the orientation towards Earth, are proof that our world is a simulation? And we don't notice the virtual nature of our world, just like we don't notice the panda in this picture, hidden among the snowmen. But let's return to the 1% of the observable universe. There are things in it called orbital resonances. This is a phenomenon where the orbital periods of two or more celestial bodies are related as small whole numbers. As a result, these bodies periodically come close to each other at certain points in their orbits. Sergei Yazev, a senior researcher at the Institute of Solar Terrestrial Physics, Russian Academy of Sciences, and PhD in Physics and Mathematics, will explain what is wrong with them. It is known that Uranus's orbit has a 1:3 resonance with Saturn. Neptune's orbit has a 1:2 resonance with Uranus. Pluto's orbit has a 1:3 resonance with Neptune. It can be assumed that the solar system was either created or adjusted with the purpose of nurturing Earth's civilization. Astronomer Leonid Xanfomality says the same thing. Saturn's orbit exhibits a 2:5 resonance relative to Jupiter. Apparently, the structure of the solar system was determined by Jupiter, since the orbital parameters of all the planets are in the correct ratios with its orbit. However, the formation of Jupiter on its current orbit is an unlikely event. Despite the large number of models explaining the resonant properties of the solar system, one can also consider the model of artificial intervention. You can learn a bit more about resonance in our episode dedicated to sound. But let's continue. Mercury's motion is synchronized with Earth's motion. From time to time, Mercury is in inferior conjunction with the Earth. This is the position when the Earth and Mercury are on the same side of the Sun, lining up with it in a straight line. The inferior conjunction repeats every 116 days, which coincides with the time of 2 complete revolutions of Mercury. And when Mercury meets the Earth, it always faces it with the same side. Venus also holds many unsolved mysteries within itself. Why does it have no magnetic field or radiation belts? Why isn't water from the interior of this heavy and heated planet being pushed out into the atmosphere as happened on Earth? Why does Venus rotate from east to west instead of west to east like the other planets? Maybe it flipped upside down, and its north pole became the south pole? Or did someone throw it into orbit, spinning it in the opposite direction first? Venus makes its closest approach every 584 days, reaching inferior conjunction. And at these moments, Venus always faces the Earth with the same side. This strange eye-to-eye gaze cannot be explained from the perspective of classical celestial mechanics. This is a visualization of Earth and Venus moving together. The scale is arbitrary, but you can get an idea. It's precisely in the rays of this amazing flower that the planets look at each other. Thus, Venus and Mercury have what is called a resonance of the second kind. They orient themselves not toward the Sun, but toward the Earth. From everything said above, one rather heretical conclusion suggests itself. The functions of the 4 planets closest to the Sun were originally connected with creating conditions suitable for life. And the giant planets, which in other systems are never found in the outer orbits, became the direct driving force of the mechanism called the solar system. That's planetary engineering for you. It's time to examine Mars more closely. First, a bit of conspiracy theory. Not too long ago, facts were revealed about NASA falsifying the real color of Mars. Public attention was drawn to a photo showing an agency employee in front of 2 monitors where the colors of Mars looked very similar to those on Earth: blue sky, gray, and brown rocks. As a result of research, it turned out that the images of Mars actually look very similar to those of Earth. Some believe all Mars footage is filmed on Earth, while others argue Mars's atmosphere is more like Earth's than widely thought. Here are a few more anomalies of Mars that indicate that the living conditions on this planet were not so different from those on Earth. Then a cataclysm occurred that disrupted the planet's orbital and climatic characteristics. It has an elliptical orbit, as if it was disturbed by something or someone, which brings it close to the Sun every year and then takes it very far away from it. The planet's rotation speed is much lower than it should be. Mars has almost no magnetic field. Over long periods, its axis of rotation traces wild loops in space, fundamentally changing the angle of its tilt toward the Sun. The vast majority of Martian impact craters are much larger than they should be according to statistical probability, and they are clustered in the hemisphere south of the so-called dichotomy boundary. The northern hemisphere is much less pockmarked by craters and forms a continuous basin that is 3 kilometers lower in elevation than the southern hemisphere. Mars's north-south boundary is physically marked by the escarpment of the mountainous southern hemisphere. This unique divide encircles the entire planet with a huge, uneven circumference that crosses the equator at an angle of about 35 degrees. A unique feature of Mars is the monstrous chasm of Valles Marineris, carved into its surface, which is 7 kilometers deep and 4,000 kilometers long. Most scientists still tend to believe that Phobos and Deimos are asteroids that were captured by Mars's gravity. However, according to Professor Fred Singer of the University of Virginia, this theory contradicts the laws of physics and cannot explain why both moons move around the planet in almost circular and equatorial orbits. The rotation period of each of the moons matches their orbital period around Mars. But there is a planet that is even less fortunate than Mars. That very simple formula was discovered back in the 18th century by a pair of astronomers, Titius and Bode. This pattern was named after them. However, there was one unoccupied spot in this sequence. There was a missing planet that should have been located between Mars and Jupiter at a distance of about 2.8 astronomical units from the Sun. In its place is the asteroid belt. The reasons why the planet was destroyed have not been reliably established. The hypothetical planet was named Phaethon. If you substitute the reference data for the Earth, Moon, and Sun into the formula of the law of universal gravitation, then at the moment when the Moon passes between the Earth and the Sun. For example, during a solar eclipse, the Sun's gravitational force on the Moon is over twice as strong as Earth's force on the Moon. So, according to the law of universal gravitation, Earth's satellite should have long since flown out of its orbit. We discussed this in the gravity episode. Still doubtful? Do the math, you'll be surprised. Most satellites have rotation synchronized with their orbit. Astronomers know that the satellites of Earth, Mars, Saturn, except for Hyperion, Phoebe, and Ymir, Uranus, Neptune, except for Nereid, and Pluto, always face their planets with the same side. In the Jupiter system, this rotation is typical of many satellites, including all Galilean moons. And the Pluto-Charon pair is doubly unique. They both rotate while always showing the same sides to each other. For space elevator designers, they would be an ideal testing ground for developing the technology. But while we're still building space elevators only in science fiction books, it seems that someone has already been building real star systems. Or was it actually easier to set up a simulation, a virtual universe? What do you think about this? On April 10, 2019, a group of astrophysicists from the International Event Horizon Telescope Project, which is a planetary network of radio telescopes, released the first-ever image of a black hole. But could it be a fake? Could it be that black holes are just a scientific dogma that no one has ever actually proven in practice? After all, there's not a single person who has come back from a black hole and told us how great it is there. With a straight face, they tell us about global warming, the theory of relativity, gravity, and God knows what else. So maybe black holes are cut from the same cloth? What is a black hole? This term was introduced by the American theoretical physicist John Archibald Wheeler. He first used this term at a scientific conference 50 years ago. The theory of black holes began to take shape within the framework of general relativity. However, Albert Einstein himself did not believe in the existence of black holes. Since the black hole itself is invisible, we can only observe the electromagnetic waves. radiation, and distortions of space around it. In the image published by the International Event Horizon Telescope project, the so-called event horizon of a black hole is shown, the boundary of a region with extremely strong gravity, surrounded by an accretion disk, which is the glowing matter being pulled in by the black hole. Let's give the floor to a recognized expert in astrophysics, who will also show how black holes are often depicted.
Here you go. Here you go. That's how it is.
Вот так вот. Вот так вот. Так вот. Вот так вот. Вот так вот. Вот так вот.
But all these images shown by the respected expert are just simulations, and it's worth explaining in more detail how the image was obtained by the Event Horizon Telescope. After all, the quality here isn't because it was shot on a cell phone, but because the object is located just 55 million light-years away from us. It was calculated that in order to see the supermassive black hole at the center of the M87 galaxy, you would need to build a telescope the size of the Earth. But there is no such dish yet. But there are radio interferometry technologies that increase angular resolution. You can take two small telescopes and place them 100 meters apart. If they work together, their resolution will be equivalent to a large dish. The Event Horizon Telescope project is not just an interferometer, but a very long baseline radio interferometer with telescopes located on different continents. And such a system has a resolution equivalent to a telescope the size of the Earth. Ultra-precise atomic clocks were installed on the telescopes in the system, equipment for faster data processing, or even atomic detectors, as in the case of the telescope at the South Pole. Atomic clocks are needed to synchronize the data, since the telescopes are not physically connected in a network, and the data on hard drives with a total volume of 5 petabytes was transported by planes to the processing center. But the virtual telescope still couldn't collect as much signal as a dish the size of a planet would. That's why data was added from different points as the Earth rotated, covering an increasingly larger area of the virtual telescope. But that's not all. Then, the collected data went through several stages of processing by specially designed algorithms. In short, years of work by hundreds of scientists led to this result. This is a supermassive black hole. And there are also black holes that massive stars turn into during their evolution. Over billions of years, the composition of gases and the temperature inside them change, which leads to a disruption of equilibrium. Then, the star collapses. A typical stellar mass black hole has a radius of 30 kilometers and a density of more than 200 million tons per cubic centimeter. For comparison, in order for the Earth to become a black hole, its radius would have to be 9 millimeters. There is also a black hole at the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way, Sagittarius A star. Its mass is 4 million times greater than the mass of the Sun, and its size is about 25 million kilometers, roughly equal to the diameter of 18 suns. Such scales make some people wonder, could the black hole swallow our entire galaxy? Not only science fiction writers have reasons for such assumptions. A few years ago, scientists reported on the galaxy W22-460526, which is located 12.5 billion light-years away from our planet. According to astronomers, the supermassive black hole at the center of this galaxy is gradually tearing it apart, and the radiation resulting from this process is propelling giant clouds of hot gas in all directions. The galaxy being torn apart by the black hole shines brighter than 300 trillion suns. But we can relax. Nothing like this threatens our home galaxy. At least, not for the next few years. Most objects in the Milky Way, including the solar system, are too far from the black hole to feel its pull. Besides, our black hole doesn't suck in all the material like a vacuum cleaner, but rather acts as a gravitational anchor for a group of stars orbiting around it, just like the Sun does for the planets. However, even if we ever do fall into a black hole, what would that mean for us? The gravitational field around a black hole is very strong and uneven, so all objects near it change their shape and structure. The side of an object that is closer to the event horizon is pulled with greater force and falls with greater acceleration. That's why the whole object gets stretched, becoming similar to a piece of spaghetti. This phenomenon was described by the famous theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking in his book, A Brief History of Time. Even before Hawking, astrophysicists called this phenomenon spaghettification. If we describe spaghettification from the point of view of an astronaut who approached a black hole feet first, the gravitational field would pull in his legs, then stretch and tear his body apart, turning him into a stream of subatomic particles. From outside, you can't see someone fall into a black hole because it absorbs light. An outside observer would only see that the lucky person approaching the black hole gradually slows down and then completely stops. After that, the silhouette of the object will become more and more blurred, turn red, and finally just disappear forever. So what's inside there? There is no definitive answer to this question for obvious reasons. However, scientists agree that inside a black hole, the usual laws of physics as we know them no longer apply. According to one of the most fascinating hypotheses, the space-time continuum around a black hole is distorted so much that a tear forms in reality itself, which could be a portal to another universe, or a so-called wormhole. But if this is a tunnel, which in other words can be called an entrance or a portal, then what kind of mass could it have? Imagine for a second that, in fact, black holes don't have any mass, as astronomers claim, but are actually channels to adjacent spaces of the universe. And these channels appear at the junction of such spaces, which science fiction writers like to call parallel universes, although it's unlikely that anything there is actually parallel or perpendicular. And if, through a black hole, like through a channel, physically dense matter flows from our space into the lower one, then when matter flows from the space of a universe above ours, stars are formed in our universe, which appear as black holes to that donor universe. And our black holes are stars for the lower spaces. An amazing picture, isn't it? According to the concept of a heterogeneous universe, our universe is just a layer of cream in the huge cake of the matrix world, where the space of the universe forms layers, each of which has a different dimension and is qualitatively different from the others. At the same time, each layer of this cake has one more or one less primary matter. For example, our space consists of 7 primary matters, while the space above consists of 8 such building blocks of the universe. And in the space of the universe below ours, there are just 6 primary matters.
Там, где наше пространство...
The universe comes into contact with the higher space. A star is formed, and we receive a flow of matter in the form of starlight. The so-called thermonuclear reaction, that is, the decay of matter from the higher space. That's how stars are ignited. And where our space comes into contact with the lower-lying space of the universe, in that place the flow of matter already escapes from us in the form of black holes. That's why black holes attract everything that's not nailed to the floor, even though they have mass. It's simply an entrance to a connecting channel through which physically dense matter from our space of the universe flows into the lower-lying space. And all these winds, filaments, and various rays coming from black holes are just streams of other primary matters. That's the picture of the universe, where each space of the universe receives matter through stars and loses it through black holes. At the same time, there is a flow of matter between different worlds. Planet Earth. It seems like we know everything about it, but in this collection, there will be facts that will make Ridley Scott's star engineers seem like just kids in a sandbox. Let's get started. In the biochemical processes of life on Earth, an unjustifiably important role is played by a chemical element that is extremely scarce on our planet. In fact, it's almost non-existent. That element is molybdenum. The most likely explanation for this phenomenon is that life originally began in another world, on another planet, where molybdenum was present. There was much more molybdenum than on Earth, and its unjustifiably important role under the conditions of our planet was more justified there. In addition to this, the American scientist Schroeder, as a result of many years of research, discovered a whole range of chemical elements that are also extremely scarce on Earth, but even a comparatively large amount of them. Increasing their concentration in the soil not only does not harm plants, as is usually the case, but even extends their lifespan. These elements include nickel, manganese, chromium, vanadium, and molybdenum. It should also be added that the human body contains a wide variety of chemical substances, representing almost the entire periodic table. However, only 14 of them have been recognized as essential. among which are the aforementioned nickel, manganese, chromium, vanadium, molybdenum, as well as cobalt, selenium, and fluorine. Such a discrepancy between the chemical composition of our planet and the completely different percentage distribution and set of elements necessary for the existence of life forms on it seems inexplicable. But if we accept the hypothesis of the extraterrestrial origin of all earthly life, then everything falls into place. Some terrestrial plants absorb the maximum energy from the sun in a different part of the spectrum than this star emits. They behave as if they evolved on planets of another star, whose radiation peak is shifted toward higher frequencies, which corresponds, for example, to Sirius. According to these graphs, the ancestral home of terrestrial plants should be near a star that, on the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram, belongs to the class of bright white subdwarfs, while the Sun belongs to the class of yellow stars. This may indicate that certain types of plants and animals were adapted to the conditions of Earth's climatic zones from other planets. Some food crops have no wild ancestors, such as corn. It cannot reproduce by self-seeding or become wild. It requires an intelligent being for its reproduction. According to myths, a long time ago, this grain was given to people by beings who came down from the sky, whom the people of Earth considered gods. Here is what George Wells Beadle, an American geneticist and Nobel Prize winner in physiology and medicine in 1958, said, "Corn contains a strange genetic cocktail, and it is impossible to find the exact ancestor of this plant on planet Earth. It's also very, very strange with wheat." The Russian scientist Nikolai Vavilov, as a result of a global study of various types of wheat, identified as many as 3 independent places of origin for this crop. Syria and Palestine turned out to be the homeland of wild wheat and einkorn wheat. Abyssinia, or Ethiopia, is the homeland of durum wheat, and the foothills of the Himalayas are the center of origin for soft wheat varieties. As Vavilov wrote in his work, "Some remarks on the problem of the origin of wheat. It is quite significant that in Abyssinia, which contains the maximum primary varietal diversity, cultivated wheat species with 28 chromosomes, all the main wild relatives of wheat are completely absent. This fact leads to the necessity of revising our understanding of the process of the origin of cultivated plants. At the same time, the difference between wheat species is enormous. Einkorn wheat has 14 chromosomes wild, and durum wheat have 28 chromosomes, while soft wheat has 42 chromosomes. Doubling and tripling the chromosome set requires methods and techniques that are incompatible with primitive selection, up to and including intervention at the genetic level. At the same time, even the earliest archaeological finds already reveal a ready-made diversity of wheat species. A similar picture of the separation of cultivated species from the regional areas where their wild forms are distributed can also be seen in a whole range of other plants: barley, peas, chickpeas, flax, carrots, and others. In no ancient myths or legends known to people does a person try to take credit for mastering agriculture for themselves or their ancestors. This is always the prerogative of certain gods. The great god Quetzalcoatl brought corn to Mexico. The god Viracocha taught people agriculture in the Peruvian Andes, and Osiris gave the knowledge of agriculture to the peoples of Ethiopia, that is, Abyssinia and Egypt. The Sumerians were introduced to agriculture by Enki and Enlil, gods who descended from the heavens and brought them seeds of wheat and barley. Heavenly spirits helped the Chinese master agriculture, and in Tibet, the lords of wisdom brought fruits and grains that were previously unknown on Earth. According to the oldest legends and traditions that have come down to us, the gods looked and behaved much like ordinary people, but their abilities and powers were incomparably greater than those of humans. The oldest peoples on Earth never believed they originated here. They either trace their lineage back to celestial gods, or have myths about their ancestors directly migrating from other worlds. This idea, from earlier and more ancient sources, even migrated into the biblical myth about the expulsion of the first people from the heavenly paradise and their banishment to Earth, where by that time life had already been sown in the form of animals and plants. There is information in ancient texts that was clearly brought to the planet from outside. Clay tablets found in the temple libraries of Nippur and Sippar indicate that as far back as 5,000 years ago, it was known in Sumer that the starry sky completes its full rotation in 25,920 years. This is called the period of Earth's axis precession. On the other side of the globe, in the astronomical texts of the ancient Maya, the same number appears. How could ancient peoples have had accurate information about the period of precession? After all, the entire history of today's humanity is less than half the length of this cycle. The ancient Maya not only knew the very concept of the true year, but also its exact duration. They considered it to be equal to 365.242199 days. According to the Gregorian calendar, which we use today, the duration of the true year is 365.2425 days. And only in recent decades, with the help of the most precise astronomical instruments, its actual duration was determined to be 365.242198 days. Such extreme precision is simply impossible with the gradual development of civilization on the planet. Modern science has no answer to the question of how the priests of ancient Egypt had an accurate understanding of the planet's magnetic poles. On the other side of the planet, ancient Indian sources estimated the age of the Earth at 4.32 billion years, which is close to modern data. And the cuneiform tablets of Mesopotamia, compiled more than 3,000 years ago, claim that the radius of the Earth is 6,310.5 kilometers. Today, it is 6,371 kilometers. Scientists of the 20th century attribute this slight difference to the expansion of the Earth. The ancient Sanskrit texts Surya Siddhanta and Brihad Sataka divide the day into 60 parts, called kala. A kala was equal to our 24 minutes, and in turn, it was divided into 60 vikala. Further sexagesimal division of time intervals into para, tatat para, vitatat para, and yima ended with the unit called kashta, which was equal to 1/300 millionth of a second. Why would a backward people need such a unit of time, which could only be used in atomic physics? In ancient times, every civilization had its own calendar system, which started from some real event, a flood, an earthquake, or the end of a people's migration. In the ancient history of humanity, there really is an amazing coincidence in the starting points of various calendars. The ancient Egyptian calendar cycle, the Sothic period, lasted 1,460 years. One of these cycles ended in 1322 BC. If you count 7 cycles back from that year, you get 11,542 BC. The ancient Assyrian calendar consisted of lunar cycles of 1,805 years. The end of one of these cycles falls in 712 BC. If you count 6 cycles back from it, you get 11,542 BC again. The ancient Indian lunisolar cycle consisted of 2,850 years. The Iron Age, Kali Yuga, which we are living in now, began in 3,102 BC. Counting 3 cycles back from this date, we get 11,652 BC. For the ancient Maya in Central America, the beginning of the calendar era falls on 3,373 BC, and the calendar cycle is 2,760 years. Again, counting 3 cycles back, we arrive at 11,653 BC. Such a coincidence of calendars among different peoples, separated by oceans and deserts, cannot be explained by chance. It is obvious that some single event of global significance served as the starting point for all 4 calendars. Less well known, but recorded in ancient India and Mesopotamia, in Africa and ancient Greece, in Central America and Tierra del Fuego, is the myth that before the flood, there was no moon in the sky. For example, the Bushmen of South Africa have an ancient legend that the moon appeared in the sky only after the flood. A similar legend exists among the Indians of Tierra del Fuego. One day, the sea rose to the sky, and the moon emerged from it. The Greek epic about the semi-legendary happy land of Arcadia calls its inhabitants proselenes. meaning pre-lunar people, because they lived on Earth when there was no moon in the sky yet. This myth was also confirmed by Apollonius of Rhodes, the keeper of the Library of Alexandria. Referring to manuscripts known to him, Apollonius wrote that the moon did not always shine in the sky above the Earth. And during excavations in Sumer, clay tablets were even discovered that tell about events after the flood, when the moon appeared in the sky.
There are quite a few theories about the origin of humans today, but 3 of them are the most popular. These are the theory of evolution, creationism, and the extraterrestrial or cosmic version. Let's look at the facts that allow us to take a different view of the commonly accepted perspectives on the origin of humans. There is the aquatic theory, or the theory of the aquatic ape, Hydropithecus. Like the savanna theory, it is just a hypothesis, but nevertheless, it explains some aspects of human development. According to it, after leaving the jungle, our ancestor went not to the savanna, but to the sea, river, or lake, to swim and dive. Here are some human features associated with the aquatic theory. Modern humans can dive thanks to voluntary control over the breathing process. Moreover, humans have the so-called reflex to close the airways when submerged in water. This reflex is triggered automatically when water reaches the face. The windpipe is not separated from the esophagus. The larynx is low. A similar structure is found only in aquatic mammals, such as seals. It allows for controlling breathing, holding it, and diving. The human body has a vital need for iodine and sodium chloride, salt, which is abundant in seafood. The lack of iodine in consumed foods leads to thyroid diseases. It is possible to have a complete diet exclusively with seafood, for example, Japanese cuisine. The presence of small webs between the fingers. About 7% of people are born with webs between their toes. Humans have a web between the thumb and index finger, while primates do not. The presence of vernix caseosa in newborn babies is also characteristic of marine mammals, but not of monkeys. The presence of a swimming reflex in newborns is an atavism in modern humans. A large amount of fatty tissue in the mammary glands is characteristic only of humans. This can be explained by the fact that milk had to retain heat in cold water. Female monkeys have small mammary glands without fatty tissue. All this is fine, but maybe the Hydropithecus didn't swim on this planet, or maybe it doesn't matter where it swam. The main thing is that it served as a donor of genetic material. A number of historical documents indicate the extraterrestrial origin of humans. Sumerian mythology describes the creation of humans in the most detail. According to the sources, in the very beginning, the world was ruled by gods, in modern interpretation, representatives of extraterrestrial civilizations who looked like humans. They came from the heavens to earth, which required a lot of effort to develop. The god Enki suggested creating humans to shift the burden of labor onto them. One of the gods was put to death, his genetic material was taken, and as stated in the source, his flesh and blood were mixed with clay. From the resulting material, the first human was created, similar to the gods but a slave to them. That's why the expression servant of God has this meaning. Other ancient texts also often mention human-like beings created by Enki and the mother goddess. And here's what's interesting. The results of mitochondrial DNA analysis showed that all people are descendants of one woman who lived about 200,000 years ago, the so-called mitochondrial Eve. Recent scientific studies indicate that there are 223 genes in the human body that are not found in other inhabitants of the Earth. First, perphteron or blue blood, created in the early 1980s, is suitable for all people without exception. It is possible that in ancient times this term, blue blood, was used literally, and it referred specifically to representatives from other lands. Human blood, like that of most animals, is red because hemoglobin contains iron ions, but there are organisms that have hemocyanin, which is copper-based instead of hemoglobin. The blood of such creatures is blue. These include certain insects and mollusks. According to one theory, on the planet where the gods came from, there is more copper than iron, and evolution there took a path where copper was used in the blood to transport gases and nutrients. The body temperature of 36.6 degrees Celsius is also not a coincidence, because it is at this temperature that water has its minimum heat capacity. Let's look at the graph. To maintain the water temperature in the body at 36.6, the least amount of heat is needed compared to other temperatures. That means less fuel in the form of food, less strain on the cells and the body's systems as a whole. This temperature is too low to destroy viruses, but there is a mechanism to raise the temperature to 40 degrees and above when many bacteria and viruses die. Humans are not designed for life in Earth's conditions, as evidenced by their physiological maladaptation. Experts note quite a few such inconsistencies. Why, for example, did evolution give humans constantly growing hair on their heads? To survive? But that's absurd. Imagine a child of an ancient human whose hair, without scissors, would get in the way of seeing, moving, or running away. It's impossible to explain the constant and rather rapid growth of hair on the head through evolution. After all, if some kind of anomaly does occur, like with this monkey, then the fur is lost completely all over the body. Giving birth is also much more difficult for a woman than for most animals, and the period of helplessness for a newborn human is abnormally long compared to that of the animal world. Back pain and other musculoskeletal disorders are related to poor adaptation of the skeleton to current planetary conditions. A person can break their limbs by falling from their own height, which is not observed in animals. A person can exist without clothing only within a very narrow temperature range of 20 to 26 degrees. The thermoregulation system is based on evaporation, which means clothing is necessary and a full body hair covering is not intended. This also remains an unresolved question for evolutionists. What happened to the full body hair covering? Magnetic storms have a harmful effect on humans. The frequencies of Schumann resonances, or rather changes in their parameters, do as well. During long runs, breathing becomes so rapid that the body clearly doesn't get enough oxygen for all metabolic processes. The biological body was made for a different atmospheric gas ratio, just as it was meant for a different sleep and rest pattern. The so-called human circadian rhythm does not equal a day. People who spend long periods in complete isolation, like speleologists for example, usually switch to a longer daily cycle, 26 to 32 hours. Moreover, there is a known case of a 56-hour circadian rhythm. This mysterious feature gives reason to believe that a 24-hour day is not natural for the human body. If we shrank down to the nano level and took a journey inside a living cell, we would see electric motors, conveyors, assembly lines, and even walking robots. According to biologists, about 40 molecular machines known to science operate inside a living cell. They transport cargo along molecular rails and act as switches for chemical processes. Molecular machines generate energy to sustain life, contract our muscles, and build other molecular machines. For example, the proton ATP synthase is the smallest biological electric motor in nature, only 10 nanometers wide. With its help, living organisms produce adenosine triphosphate. ATP consists of adenosine, which stores a lot of energy. This stored energy is needed to power a wide variety of biochemical reactions. Kinesin is a linear molecular motor that moves through the cell along tracks, polymer filaments. Like a dock worker, it carries all sorts of cargo, mitochondria, lysosomes, using ATP molecules as fuel. Kinesin looks like a toy figure made of thin, twisted ropes. At the same time, when one end of it uses energy, a molecule of ATP, while moving, the other end releases a component for energy production, ADP. As a result, there is a continuous cycle of supplying and consuming energy for useful work. As research has shown, kinesin is able to walk quite briskly through the cell with its rope-like legs. Taking steps only 8 nanometers long, in a second it moves across what are, by cellular standards, gigantic distances of 800 nanometers. That means it takes 100 steps per second. Try to imagine such speeds in the human world. Walking along microtubule pathways, kinesin carries various cargoes inside the cell. All of this seems like the product of a civilization that knew how to create artificial forms of life, and recent research confirms that this is quite possible. Humans are capable of creating artificial nanorobots that in the future will be able to live and work in the intracellular world. Back in the early 1990s, English scientists from the University of Sheffield created the first molecular shuttle, a synthetic device in which molecules move spatially. To create it, they use rotaxane, an artificial substance in which a ring-shaped molecule is threaded onto a linear molecule. In 2010, a group of American bioengineers, Milan Stojanovic and his colleagues, created a molecular nanorobot capable of moving along DNA. During the experiment, scientists were able to observe how their nanorobot managed to take 50 steps on its own and move 100 nanometers. The robot, which looks like a spider, can autonomously perform several commands: walk, turn, and stop. And just 3 years later, English and Scottish bioengineers led by David Lee were able to create the world's first molecular nanoconveyor, a nanomachine capable of assembling peptides, which are short proteins. In nature, this task is performed by ribosomes, organelles found in our cells. The bioengineers used a rotaxane molecule as the basis for their machine and were able to assemble proteins with specific properties from individual amino acids on its rod. Thus, if Earth scientists are capable of creating artificial life, why wouldn't this be possible for other civilizations as well? So discussions about the creator have a slightly different meaning, don't they?
Many highly developed civilizations in the universe possess technologies for interstellar travel and the creation of engineering structures on a planetary scale. We are one of those civilizations. Super advanced biometallic technologies have given us access to controlling space. Based on them, we created ships that use the warping of space itself to travel through the cosmos. How did we achieve this? Our scientists have long known that the universe is not alone and that there are countless parallel universes. They also understood that any mass affects the space it occupies. After all, light waves near a system star change their straight-line motion to curved motion. This is true for both the microcosm and the macrocosm. For example, on the scale of the macrocosm, this was the understanding of the nature of black holes. A black hole is a region of space curvature where parallel universes connect and their matter flows from one to another. A similar picture can be seen in the microcosm as well. The nucleus of each atom, just like a star on a macro scale, curves the space around itself. And the heavier the nucleus, the greater the degree of this curvature. If the atomic weight is above 200 atomic units, the nucleus loses its stability and begins to decay into more stable and simpler nuclei, as is the case with radioactive substances. In organic compounds, this rule is even more pronounced. Because of the massiveness of carbon chains, space becomes even more distorted. The qualitative barrier between the physical and etheric levels of planets disappears. There is a transition to a qualitatively new organization of matter, to a living organism. Just as in the macrocosm, where universes flow into one another through black holes, in the microcosm, around large organic molecules like DNA and RNA, a transition zone of matter is formed from the physical level of the planet to the organic. It was precisely the understanding of these two processes that allowed the scientific minds of our civilization to understand how to create ships capable of traveling vast distances. Based on a biometallic structure made from huge organic molecules like RNA and DNA, where heavy metals have free bonds, these ships were created. This is how the exploration and colonization of other star systems began. Look at this. The process of cell division is much more mysterious than it seems. The old cell completely disappears during the process of division. And after a while, two new cells begin to appear, exact copies of the old one. The process of teleportation, similar to cell division, initiates the transfer of matter from one dimension to another and then back again, but at a different point. Biometallic technologies make it possible to move millions of times faster than light and to perform various manipulations with matter. But the technology also has a number of drawbacks. It is limited by the strength of the ships and the mental limits of the living operators of these technologies. Therefore, the scale of space exploration was not as extensive as we would like. At that time, it was decided to conduct a unique experiment, which was carried out in several stages. Everything began with the selection and correction of a star system. In order for conditions suitable for the emergence of life to form on one of the planets, it was necessary for all the planets within the chosen system to synchronize and move in the correct order. Therefore, they had to be moved and their orbits further adjusted. It was also necessary to add artificial satellites to calibrate the endogenous and exogenous processes of the celestial bodies. The next stage was the terraforming of the planets. This was not an uncontrolled process either. The giant quarries, artificially formed after this large-scale work, were later disguised as natural landscapes. Then came the planet's geospheres. To create the conditions necessary for the normal life of the main biological species, controlled evolution was initiated, which was supposed to gradually lead to the desired result. It was necessary to create a climate suitable for life, so we made efforts to make the planet warm and comfortable. The biosphere began to develop rapidly. Many plants and animals were brought to the new planet and gradually populated the entire planet. Their evolutionary development then continued on its own path. All species of flora and fauna were assigned a certain place at different stages of evolution. Each species was given specific requirements regarding shape, size, food, cyclicity, and life processes. The humanoid species, as a result of this evolution, was supposed to appear at the stage of precisely calibrated changes in the animal and plant world in order to occupy a specific ecological niche. With complex connections and food chains, the creation of all food chains, various ecosystems in different natural zones of the planet, genetic suppression of undesirable and stimulation of necessary species of living organisms, all these actions were carried out through the use of nature-like technologies. But of course, it wouldn't be an experiment if everything went smoothly without any problems. It seemed that somewhere in the vastness of space there were those who didn't like our idea of creating a new civilization in artificial conditions. This powerful destructive force had significant potential to periodically cast doubt on the possibility of bringing the experiment to its logical conclusion. For example, even at the first stage, one of the planets in the star system was destroyed and turned into an asteroid belt, while another lost its entire atmosphere. The creation of natural cataclysms was one of the main tools of our processes. When the time came, genetically compatible races from other developed planetary systems were introduced into the created ecological niche. The new inhabitants of the planet settled in natural zones similar to those of their home planets, so that adaptation would happen as quickly as possible. No one forced the first settlers. They made the decision to relocate and begin exploring new planets consciously and voluntarily. The level of development of the participants was also about the same. The original plan was for evolution to take its course, and for intelligent species to feel at home on the new planet, gradually evolving and developing. This was achieved by blocking a significant part of the brain's capabilities, leaving active only the number of neurons necessary for a sufficiently low level of awareness and intelligence. The races were essentially sent back down the evolutionary ladder so that they would begin their social development in these new conditions and not rely on memories of their previous experiences on their home planets. Within the framework of the experiment, it was not allowed to remain stuck at any one stage of social evolution for too long, so we actively stimulated the development of the species by introducing advanced technologies and social constructs. For this, a dynamic evolutionary process requires a rapid turnover within the planet's social structure. With a long lifespan of the species, this is impossible, so the lifespan of the species inhabiting the experimental planet is quite short. But our opponents did not stop trying to interfere with the experiment and continued to intervene in the process of the planet's development. Destructive work was also being carried out at the societal level. Through the creation of conditions for the mixing of certain races, genetic evolutionary distortions were created, an unhealthy social climate was formed, and natural disasters added fuel to the fire, creating conditions for the development of a new civilizational landscape of the planet. As a result, the society of the planet was infected with dangerous deviations. We made the decision to impose a quarantine on interactions with others. Because in the current state of society, this will inevitably lead to self-destruction and could also harm other intelligent species. We see how the civilization we created is following the path of technological development, and this in turn poses a threat of complete destruction both to individual social structures and to the planet as a whole. But despite the fact that humanity continues to follow a dangerous mechanistic path, there remains a possibility of reaching a fundamentally different level of development, one that is beyond the limits of technocracy. When, without technical means that are limited by their very nature, it becomes reality through the power of thought alone. Movement through space and time, control over natural processes on planetary and cosmic scales, and other effects on matter and space that are inconceivable to the modern mind. The key to this level lies in the study of the real laws of the world around us, where the physical world is only the natural result of processes taking place on other levels, and the biological body is only a part of the multi-dimensional essence of a human being.